Brake Check. I'm Craig.
And I'm Brian.
And Brian, we've got something special tonight for the audience.
What's that?
Or for the viewers.
Oh, thank you for correcting yourself.
We have an on-site broadcast.
That is right.
Or recording.
Right, recording. That's right. If the audio sounds a little weird, we apologize in advance. We are on site in Austin, Texas, and we are here for the Texas Auto Riders Truck Rodeo, which is a 2.5 or 1.5, almost 2 day event of driving things off-road, on-road, and just having fun and getting reviews. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have a lot of content for probably the next month or so. We'll be trickling out stuff that we've filmed from this event.
Yes, so pretty cool. We got to preview some of those vehicles that are going to be available tomorrow that we're going to be touching and driving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely going to be fun. There's a lot of cool stuff we get to touch and play with, and things that sounded very kinky.
That sounds weird. Don't, just cut that out.
Just cut that out? Or maybe we'll leave it in.
Leave it
I don't
in
know.
for fun. But we'll
Anyways,
move on.
Lots of cool things that we get to drive tomorrow that we're excited about. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But yes, a little bit different format. It's nice being in the same room. We're normally, our studio's, Brian, I don't know if the viewers know this. We're usually in a vehicle, sometimes a press vehicle.
About an hour away from each other.
And we do separate recordings and we merge them together later.
For the record, that started out because we each drive the same type of pickup truck, and then the audio matched beautifully.
Yes.
And it's since evolved to whatever's in the driveway at the time.
Right. So, but tonight we're one mic, we're in the same room, so it's nice. We can actually see each other and interact with each other a little bit better. So that's fun. We're excited about that. So let's get into it. So, Brian, one of the cars we're going to talk about is the IS 350.
F-Sport IS 350.
F-Sport
or
IS
Sport
350.
F, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, hard to keep up with these days. But we had it a while back. It's been a while now.
It has. It's been in the queue to talk about. Yep.
And we keep forgetting to bring it up. So, but it was a beautiful blue.
Grecian water blue. Freaking gorgeous.
Absolutely.
Or Grecian water, excuse me. Grecian water.
Grecian. Yeah. Oh, yes. Don't want to mess that up. But it was also had these active dampers on it.
It did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm going to start off, and then you can say what you want about it. But here's what I want to say about that car. So, IS350 F-Sport, Grecian blue, had the naturally aspirated V6. It was the rear-wheel drive version.
Correct. You can get an all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. Different trans. This meant you had the 8-speed auto, whereas the all-wheel drive gives you the 6-speed auto.
Both Eisen units.
Correct.
We're not the biggest fan of the transmissions.
No, more programming than the transmissions themselves.
But here's what I want to say about that car. I had this car, and it starts raining, so much so that the streets like turn into rivers. Not only did it get us through that with quite aplomb, it also, Brian, and it was in our video. You can go back and watch our video, please. It has a weather map that was very convenient.
Oh, it does.
Because one of the things they updated in the Lexus is it's got a touchscreen.
Which is pretty good. I like it.
And it's much better than it used to be.
Oh, yes. It's not top of the line. It's not leading the pack.
No.
But it's caught up and on par with all the competition.
Yes.
Now.
So it got us through that. That was nice. It was comfortable. It was confidence inspiring, despite it being just rear-wheel drive. No problems there. And then also we get to my neighborhood, and we've talked about this before on the podcast. My neighborhood is basically, I don't know, Detroit or Sarajevo.
Baghdad.
Baghdad.
In terms of roads.
Yeah, in terms of roads.
Yeah.
And that active suspension.
Yes.
That was one of the smoothest riding vehicles I have driven through my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah. So I'm going to hit on what those dampers are real quick. Yep. There's 3 settings. There's normal, sport, and sport plus. And what that means is super soft, and also soft. But what it really means is grip at all times. So what people confuse soft and firm with in the sporting car world is people assume a rough ride means it handles well. And that is simply not true. And I want to commend Lexus, even though it didn't feel that sporty, because I've been trained by other cars to think, oh, it's got to ride a little bit rough, right? It never lost grip. To the point that it didn't want to drift very much because it just put the power down so well. And I would actually argue that the car needed more power because the suspension was so well tuned. And it never spilled your coffee no matter what you did. And we didn't put a G meter on it, but I would argue it's hanging with its competition. Matching, if not beating, or hanging right there with it. I don't think it's fair to say it handles poorly because it handles softly. That is an absolute positive. They did a great job with it. Really good tuning to it. And I don't think they're going to get the credit for it from everybody like they should.
And we drove this car on track at the roundup.
We
previously.
did. That one was the all-wheel drive, same motor, but the 6-speed trans.
And we were pretty excited about getting that. And so when we got it, we were all excited. But were you as excited when we turned it back in as we were when we got it?
No. I was more excited about it because when we had it on track, we had the 6-speed, which I think, at least at the mid to lower speeds, the gearing was more alive. Whereas the 8-speed seemed like it was chasing MPG over performance. At least in programming, I felt like the final drive needed to be numerically higher to make use of the 8 gears that were there. I found myself thinking this is really a nice, comfortable place to be that does handle well, but doesn't really excite anyone. And so I was never excited by it. I never got... In fact, a Hyundai Sonata Inline I found more exciting, which I think is a great comparison because the price margin is formidable between the two.
About $20,000 difference.
It's a big difference. Now, it is front-wheel drive.
Yeah.
But I'll argue all day long. It was more fun to drive. And because I had a dual-clutch transmission, it was more engaging to drive the entire time as well. So it really is. Look, there's a buyer for the IS. They're going to sell every one they make. I feel like the looks are so good on the updated car that the driving didn't quite match the sporting intentions. But that might be a me problem. They're not going to have any problem selling it. They know they're buyers.
The Sonata Inline was... That's a great point. $20,000 cheaper, front-wheel drive, or wrong-wheel drive, as we like to say.
Yeah.
And was more exciting to drive than this was.
Or Kia K5 GT, that same realm.
Yeah. But here's what I would say. I did like the chassis enough and the interior and just everything else about that car.
Yeah.
It was just spot on that the IS 500 is out now.
Oh, man, I have looked at that tremendously because it starts at $56,000, which sounds like a lot, but it's not.
That's not much more than the F-Sport.
Exactly. Go look at a 3 Series BMW, 4-cylinder, and you're going to bust that number in a heartbeat. So 56K or high 50s, low 60s is the number for that. That's going to be a valuable car in 10 years, and it's not going to lose any value or very little along the way. And by the way, the Lexus interior is really nice. I was really pleased by it. And let me just be clear. The Lexus interior is much nicer, and it's a nicer car than the Sonata is. And that's where that 20 grand comes into play. And the chassis is very good. It's just not that engaging with the V6. Yeah, so that's my take on the IS 350. But more importantly, and more recently actually, and in fact I'm bumping this car up the conversation list, is the Camaro SS.
SS.
Oh, excuse me. There's 1SS or 2SS. It's available in both packages. The Camaro 1SS or 2SS, which Craig did not want to drive before we recorded it. 1LE, which is a great car. Craig, you've driven Alpha chassis GM cars before, more than I have actually. What did you think of the 1SS 108?
Well, okay, so I'm glad you asked that question because that's a great question. And, we were raised. I just want to we do our best to be objective here on Brake Check because we want to give the audience objective advice, unbiased.
Let's be clear, we are unbiased, but we do have passive cars. Everyone has a history of car ownership.
We want to be like the Fox News. We want to be fair and unbiased, right? Or fair and objective, or whatever.
OAN?
I don't know. Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Or is NPR? I can't tell.
My point with all that is, we got to be honest and upfront with the people.
Sure.
We were raised Mopar at first,
initially,
and then Ford.
Correct.
And then also just cars in general.
Sure.
But also a little bit of a not always talked highly of GM products, which is a little unfair.
Well, once upon a time, there was reason for that.
Okay, good point. We're going to get that in the next topic.
Sure.
Okay. But so with that, we have these blinders we walk into with, which is unfair. But yes, this Alpha chassis. This Alpha platform, I've driven it with the CTS, the ATS.
ATS, yeah.
And the Camaro now. It is an unbelievable platform.
It feels like the chassis is chiseled from one piece of billet aluminum. Phenomenal. And look, talk about biases. This is not bias. This is simply history. I've owned a lot of Mustangs. And that's because I couldn't fit in Camaros previously. To be totally honest with you, I've wanted Camaros in the past or other sports cars. This Camaro, 1, I can fit in. And 2, I'm sorry, Ford, my dear Ford, this chassis is better than the S550 Mustang chassis.
Ooh! There comes the hate mail.
It just is. I'm sorry. Now, there are its faults because GM spent all their money on the chassis. They forgot to design it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So, and what I mean by that is the masses look at that Camaro because I've told everyone since we drove it, guys, have you heard of the Camaro SS 1LE? It's the third coming of Jesus. You got to pay attention here. This is important. The automotive community has missed something here. No one cares. They go, yeah, but the Mustang looks better. Everyone says that. And look, I don't totally disagree. I don't think the Camaro is particularly beautiful, but I do think it looks very purposeful. And there's something about that that really appeals to me. Like, this is a track tool. This is not a look at me at the Sonic driving car. This is let's go do some laps. This means business. In fact, I compared it to a budget Porsche in the review. So yeah, no, it's good. Turn-in was great. The steering was great. And also it had mag ride, which the Mach 1 we recently drove also had, which is really good on both cars, honestly, both cars. This is not to make the Mustang sound like it's a bad chassis. But as good as I thought the Mustang was, the Camaro felt a little better.
No, absolutely. It was the mag ride was that is a magic trick in cars.
It is magic,
just,
yeah.
Period. And yeah, you talked about it's a track weapon or
It's a track tool for sure.
track tool. It's a wherever you're at weapon.
Oh yeah,
That's what it is.
It makes backroads tracks. No question about it.
Yeah, we're not the only ones. We're probably the first ones to say this. Other journalists have said the same thing. But here's the thing about the Camaro SS1LE, and you're right. I did not want to drive it. You get these fast cars in here like the Shelby GT350, and I'm like, whatever.
Which you also loved after you drove it.
Yeah, this might be right there with it. I'm
Oh,
going to say that. Okay, but here's the deal. Wherever you're driving that car at that particular time, whether you're on a back road, traffic, track, anyone pulls up next to you, you've immediately, other than maybe some sort of exotic car, and maybe a bunch of those, you're the fastest car.
Well, and look, let's be very clear. The Mustang is not slower than this car. But on the back roads, it is more poised than this car.
Yes.
And so I said jokingly in the review that that Chevrolet accidentally made a sports car. What I mean by that is that if you told me this wasn't a Camaro, I would never think it was a Camaro driving it. Because we grew up with the Catfish Camaros, the F-bodies, the old IROC Zs.
Back in the Malaise era.
And which we're going to get to in a minute. And look, Ford had that time too. What I'm getting at is of a modern sports car, because look, credit where it's due. Ford and GM both have made sports cars, not pony cars. They quit making pony cars in the mid-teens, right? When they went to IRS and the Mustangs and they did the Alpha chassis Camaro. What they've done is made a really good sports car. And now they've kept a pushrod V8. And I'll be honest, the Coyote V8 out of the Mustang is still more exciting to me and more entertaining.
And sounds better.
And does sound better. Not that the LS or the LT sounds bad.
No, they both sound amazing.
It's not amazing, but that high RPM wrap, you just don't get that out of the LT. The Tremec transmission,
That's it.
nails it, and that's what we loved at the Shelby so much.
Yep.
And now the Mach 1 we had was an auto, but they do make that same transmission in the manual. And man, if you told me to buy a Mach 1 manual or that Camaro today, it would be a hard bargain of, well, which one happens to be closer in the color I like or whatever.
Exactly.
Right, because you couldn't tell me not to get the Camaro, and I'll be honest, I actually see and fit better in the Camaro than I do the Mustang. And the exterior dimensions feel a little bit smaller to me, which is nice.
Yeah. The last thing I just want to leave with the Camaro is not only did I really like it and was blown away by how reminded how good the Alpha platform is. It's just incredible.
Totally.
GM's done a good job there. Everybody wants to dog the small windows. We talked about this on the review.
Yeah.
The review's coming out soon. The full review.
Right.
But everybody talks about, you can't see out of the car, you can't see out of the car, you can't see out of the car. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can see fine out of the car. Can you see not as good as maybe some other cars out? Sure. The visibility is a little less, but it's not like just horrendous.
What?
That's ridiculous.
Can I bring up the Supra again? I know we talked about this recently.
Yeah.
But the Supra had compromises. You talked about it in the review. The cup holder's in a weird spot. The visibility is awkward. When you get in, you take your head off to get in the car and put it back on. That's part of having a sports car. If you want to look like that and you want it to drive like that, sometimes you have to make some compromises. This is no different. But I'll argue it's less compromised than the Supra is. For sure. And if you get to the Mustang, by the way, I'm taller. I have more of a headroom problem in the Mustang than I do the current Camaro. So it's just something to think about.
Okay. Got a question for you.
Is there...
The Supra,
Oh, God.
the Mach 1,
Oh, no.
and the Camaro 1LE. You get to make one your track car, one your daily car, one your drive across the country car. What's what?
One has to be a daily?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to go with, so it was track, daily, and cross country.
That's right.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to go Mustang for cross country.
You're correct. Ding.
Ding. And that's because the seats are actually really comfortable for longer cruises. Even though the Camaro seats weren't uncomfortable, I think after about 3 hours, I might think differently because they're Recaros. And the Mach 1 you can get with regular seats, not Recaros. I'm going to... This is terrible, man.
Mm-hmm. You mean it's genius?
This is actually a really not fun thing to answer because the Camaro is like the track car of all of them, I think. But I want to drive the Camaro because it's manual and I can make stupid redneck tricks while I'm driving during burnout.
Exactly.
So the reality to the answer is I'm going to...
Get the right answer.
I'm going to track the Camaro. I'm going to daily the Supra.
No, you missed it. No.
Wait, I can tell you why. Because the brakes on that Supra are not ready for it.
Okay. Well, you're wrong on this.
No, we've tracked the Supra. We've boiled brakes
You're
too.
wrong and right on this.
Okay.
The correct answer would be to daily the Camaro because, yes, you can do the redneck things in it.
Yeah, totally.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And then track the Supra because it's the
lightest. It's the lightest.
Well, it's also the least comfortable daily.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So that's a factor.
That's it.
Okay. So with that, so audience, y'all keep score there of how he got those wrong.
Right.
And how I got those right. What? Okay. Man, I like it better when you're far away because then I can't see you making these faces. So, all right. Next topic, Brian. We kind of teased it. We talked about where we're at.
Oh, yeah.
We are at the Truck Rodeo, the 2021 Truck Rodeo down in Austin, or Bee Cave.
Bee Cave, Texas. Yep.
Bee Cave, Texas.
For those of you keeping score. We're actually at the Star Hill Ranch, which is where they used to film... What's that zombie show?
Walking Dead?
Walking Dead. Yeah, Walking Dead.
That's what we're told.
We're actually in a village of... basically the compound of The Walking Dead, where the end of the series was filmed. That's where we're at.
Also fun note, at our hotel, what else do we have?
Currently, awkwardly enough, this is the American Idol staging hotel. They're doing some type of competition here, and people are singing everywhere we walk in this building. People are singing, and it is awesome.
It's like a Disney movie. It's quite entertaining, and I talked to a guy in the elevator. He's quite confident he's going to do well. So, who knows?
He's got our vote. Whoever
yeah, he's got our vote. As long as he subscribes and hits the bell.
Fair trade.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what I want to get to is, Brian, we are excited about driving some of these cars.
For sure. And I want to hold on, stop all this nonsense. I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, okay.
We walked the trail today.
Mm-hmm.
Not the trail. We walked the lineup, the motor
Mm-hmm.
pool. There's over 50 cars here right now, or trucks and SUVs. That's what I mean by cars. What are you most excited to drive on the road? And, separate question, drive on the off-road trail. For those that don't know, there's an off-road trail set up for us to sample all these vehicles. Now, some vehicles have certain ground clearances or tire profiles that make them ineligible for the hardest sections, but most of these cars can do all of the trail. So what are you most excited to drive on-road and off? 2 questions.
You're not going to like my answers.
Well, there's a right and wrong answer, just so you know.
On road, I'm excited to drive the Tundra with the active suspension.
Wrong.
Right.
The correct answer was Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I didn't say that one because I couldn't say all that. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
Oh, okay. So you may have had it right.
Yeah.
Also, the Tundra is going to be cool, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm excited to see, in all seriousness, I'm excited to see the active dampers and how that...
Yeah, it's more relevant.
That's pretty new to a truck. F-150's recently rolled it out as well.
Tell the people what this really is.
What is it?
Active suspension.
Oh, active suspension.
So it's not mag ride. General Motors has had magnetic ride in their trucks on the Denali trims for a while. It's allowed them to do 22-inch wheels and not like totally break people's teeth and spill their coffee. And it's great. I've sampled it. It's awesome. This is a different style of active suspension. This is basically, if you think of like an aftermarket coilover for like a drift car or a race car or like any type of aftermarket coilover, usually there's about 30 notches of adjustment on compression and or rebound, sometimes at the same time, sometimes one an individual. This is basically that with a module, an electric motor selecting which damper setting. So instead of changing viscosity through magnetic pulses in the mag ride suspension in the oil of the shock itself, this is opening and closing a valve in the shock. So it's pretty cool tech. It's been around in the aftermarket scene for a long time, but now they've made it streamlined for common use. What it means is there's sensors on the car that monitor speed, G-forces, and compression of suspension, and either stiffen or loosen that shock as you drive. It's kind of cool tech. It's going to be a big deal.
It's pretty cool. I think it's a big deal. Big enough. We know it's a big deal because F-150 recently copied it.
Yeah.
I think as a response to this would be my guess. I'm sure they're developing as well.
They did it. These are simultaneous.
Yeah. But the other thing is, okay, off-road.
Yep, off-road.
It's an embargoed vehicle. Am I allowed to mention it? I'm allowed to mention it, right?
You can mention it. You cannot mention driving impressions.
Okay. The Compass Trailhawk.
Oh my gosh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but you're definitely not right.
No, here's why. Look, the 392 would be a contender.
That was my number 2.
The Defender 90 is a contender.
That was number 1.
But the reason I'm not mentioning those is because I know they're all going to be able to do everything on the obstacles.
Yeah, no, the Compass will be more interesting on the trail.
The Compass Trailhawk is interesting because it's a cheap, affordable, and when it's a Trailhawk, Jeep usually makes them pretty capable.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how it does compared to other CUVs out there.
So I attended this event last year. You unfortunately couldn't make it. So just to let everyone know, this is not my first rodeo.
Okay.
Craig needs to hear that too. Truck Rodeo. I found last year, it's funny you mentioned the Compass. I found last year that the more interesting cars on the trail were the ones that weren't meant to be there. Like the Kia Telluride did awesome. And the Subaru Crosstrek did less awesome than I thought, but it was very fun. It took a lot of effort to get it through. Whereas the Ram TRX with the supercharger and the giant wheels, they're just kind of like you laughed your way through it. It was more fun on the road because you can be an idiot with a little more room. So good answer. I like that.
Okay. All right. So I wasn't wrong there.
Let's get to our topic, Craig, of this episode.
What, the worst Malaise era?
Yes.
Okay. Worst Malaise era. Let me explain what I mean by this. So Malaise era is, for those that don't know, which I'm sure you do, but it's an era in time that is just bleh.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Maybe you have that in your life sometimes. Maybe you have that. Who knows what's going on in your career sometimes. Everybody has a Malaise era.
Sure.
So does the automotive industry.
So is this like prepubescent era, or is this like...
Yeah, if you're in that crowd, you know.
Okay, yeah.
But generally speaking, the Malaise era is referred to as the mid to late 70s. And the reason being is because about 72, 73, this oil embargo comes into play, and you get this gas crisis, and nobody can get gas, and fuel economy becomes a big deal. And
Sure.
This is right when everything was huge, massive, big block motors and everything.
Land yachts. Yeah,
nobody
land yacht
cared.
cars.
Gas was cheap, and we had just domestics. We didn't really have very many imports on the scene. And then so the imports coming on the scene, and the domestics don't know how to respond with all the smog control and carburetors. It was just terrible, and the styling got bad, and it was horrendous.
Yeah, cars were objectively bad, so they tried to add styling, which was in the disco era.
Yeah.
So nothing really looked good back then.
No.
At least, look, bell-bottom pants did not translate to Cadillac very well.
No. And so, but I want to bring this up because here's my question that I'm posing. I don't know that that's the worst Malaise era. Maybe it is. Actually, it may still be. But I want to argue that there are other Malaise eras that are pretty bad as well in their own right.
Oh, boy. Okay, so look, you proposed this. We had a podcast with GT Garage Talk recently. Go check those guys out. We cross over them quite a bit. In fact, they're here. We might have a crossover review here as well. You proposed this question, and my immediate thought was, this is not up for debate. That era was the worst era, 75 to 85. In fact, let's define the eras first, and then I'll tell you how wrong you are about your opinion. So,
Actually, I've got the secret right answer. I'll tell you at the end of this.
okay, great. So the eras to me start. I know. Look, the first year of pollution control was 1968. I think it was a smog pump. It wasn't that formidable, but prior to that, cars had no horsepower deterrence whatsoever. So 68, it starts coming on. You've got smog pumps, and then you've got catalytic converters, and then you've got restrictor plates on carburetors, all kinds of silly things going on that none of them worked that well, but they are quite efficient today. You had to start somewhere. So I want to call it, when it really got bad in this era, was 75 to 85. I want to jump it by 10-year runs, but on the 5-year interval. So
Okay.
85, 95, 95, 2005, 2005, 2015, and then now, where we're at now. I think now doesn't apply because cars just make too much power in every application. So let's just ignore 2015 and on.
Yeah, and one of our points of this discussion is we're living in a golden age.
Sure.
Just like prior to the last Malaise, what you call the worst Malaise era, which there's actually one that's worse. It was the late 60s was like the golden era. Everybody talks about
the
those.
horsepower wars between the big three. You
Yeah.
had Hemis, you had 428 and 429 Fords, you had the 454 SS Chevelles, 396 Chevelles, wedge heads. I mean, it was a big deal. It was like the showdown. In fact, we grew up hearing these stories about these fabled muscle cars, which by today's standards are garbage. But back then, it was a big deal, and the sensation mattered back then, and the numbers were big. But I think today we've far surpassed that.
Right.
And tire technology alone, by the way.
So you've kind of laid out your eras. I'm not going to limit mine to just 10 years and 5-year increments, but because I think sometimes they're 7 years, sometimes they're 8 years, sometimes they're 2.
Okay.
You know. So out of the ones you've mentioned, why don't you kind of tell us the whys of which ones are bad and why they're not? Which one's the worst, the next worst in your opinion?
I'll give you a synopsis.
Out of the 7, because you think 75 to 85 is the worst.
Without a doubt, yes.
Okay, what's the next worst?
The next worst is 85 to 95.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, so 75 to 85, let's just start there.
Okay.
Heavy, you had the 502 cubic inch Cadillac Eldorado. They had a couple different,
they had a bunch of cars.
Yeah. It was this
They had the Sedan DeVille's.
Super big block V8.
Mom had one, the Sedan DeVille.
That explains a lot.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
it was a 78.
They're 0-60 in like over 12 seconds.
Oh.
They got atrocious fuel economy.
Land yachts.
And they were all torque. I think they redlined to like 3,800, something ridiculous like that, like dieseling down the road.
None of them could take a turn.
None of them could turn. Wheel covers. You've seen Bullet. They lost like 50 wheel covers in that show. And that was before this era we're talking about. It wasn't good. It was a low mark. Vapor lock was the norm. For those who don't know, vapor lock is when you turn the car off and it keeps running because the fuel is boiling in the carburetor. You can't start it up for a little while. That's pretty normal too. Wasn't brilliant. So let's fast forward to 85 to 95. This was a challenge for me because the early 80s were so bad in that the fuel crisis hit after that 502 V8 was really mainstream. And so people started going, we got to get better mileage out of this. You had cars like the Chevy Savette. Not brilliant. You had cars like the Plymouth Scamp GT. Brilliant, but not very good. You had a lot of cars like that went smaller displacement and poorly built. And Toyota was mopping the floor with the American car market at the time. They first came on the scene. Honda was shortly after them. And we all know how that went. So let's fast forward to fuel injection, which is a big, big deal, which we're still reaping the benefits of today. Fuel injection landed on the scene, at least for Ford Motor Company, in 1985. The Town Car had a throttle body version of that in like 82 or 83, the Lincoln Town Car. Wasn't very good. We actually owned one of those cars when we were younger. Wasn't brilliant. But it was better than a carburetor at the time. 85, Ford cranks out multi-port fuel injection, which that was like the equivalent of direct injection in the teens, in the 20 teens, right?
Oh, yeah.
2015 era when everyone started doing that. That was a big deal. What that meant was there's a fuel injector for each cylinder instead of a fuel injector for one bank of the engine.
Right.
Which General Motors used, and this gets back to my General Motors critique of our childhood. They use 2-port injection, which is code for 2 fuel injectors for 8 cylinders. Did it work? It did. Was it very good? It was reliable. It was actually quite reliable.
Yeah, it was pretty reliable.
Yeah, but it wasn't as smooth as what Ford was doing at the time, or even Dodge was doing at the time. But, in GM fashion, look, dude, it worked. So I don't want to criticize it completely. So that's that. They got better, but they didn't get particularly faster. They did get faster, but not like incrementally faster. You go to 95 to 05. Man, that was a rough era. Remember the Chevy Lumina? The Cavalier Z24?
Okay, hang on. But you say 85 to 95 is the next worst.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
That's where I'm going right now. Fuel injection is there, but it's not quite solved. You also had the introduction in Fordland of the 2-valve 4.6 V8. It was more efficient, kind of, than the pushrod V8. Mm-hmm. It would make more power. Well, not really. It didn't make more power than the 302. Initially, that was a pretty bad motor. In fact, they had some valve guide problems, some other things like that. But you know what it was? It's very reliable. In fact, it was more reliable than a pushrod situation. Rocker arms were not a problem. Oil pumps were not a problem. They just lasted and lasted and lasted and lasted. So reliability got much better in that time frame. You got away from interesting ignition styles of older cars. And you get a more modern relay system for electronics in cars. Got a lot better. So that's my argument there. Now, fast forward past that. 95 to 05. This is when cars started to get their game together in terms of American performance.
You're wrong here.
Hang on. Listen to me for a second. You had the Taurus SHO, which kind of blended that era. Let's be honest. It started in 89 or 88, but it kind of blended that era, and it was in its good stride by 95. 95 was like the year for an SHO. You had, which was a Yamaha V6, which turned into a Yamaha V8 in 1998. Things got better. Cars got faster. The Mustangs still weren't that great, but the LS1 GM motor came out in 1998, or at least in the Camaros, and that thing changed the performance car world to this day. People LS swap golf carts. I mean, they put it in everything. Right? That was when LS Tech really happened. And by the way, which is still a small block Chevy, they just put multi-port injection on it and a better camshaft, and they port and polish the heads. And guess what? It worked brilliantly. And the C8 Corvette today has the grandchild of that tech. It has the bones of that. And it still works today. Ford was still struggling, but they had the supercharged 0304 Cobra. They had the 32.
Which they got lawsuits over.
That was not the supercharged one. That was the 99 you're thinking of.
Okay.
But I take your point. They had some power issues there.
Mm-hmm.
They had rated that at 320 or 300, and it was like 280. Mm-hmm. And anyways, they did fix that by porting and polishing them, which turned into the Mach 1, which is a great car. Still an old chassis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Ford got to their best Malaise era, I think a lot of manufacturers got to their better Malaise era, but I will argue GM had a better era 95 to 05. Ford had a better era 05 to 2015. And that's when you had the introduction of the 3-valve Ford Mustang.
Well, then it's not a Malaise era. They're getting out of a Malaise era.
They're getting out of it. But the next Malaise era is going to be, according to you, because you don't seem to like the 2000s very much. I think a lot of...
I don't like the way you're splitting them up.
Okay. Well, let me wrap this up real quick.
Okay.
05 to 2015 was the biggest movement for American sports cars, period. Because you had the 3-valve Mustang V8 introduced, which you can complain about it in certain ways, but it was substantially better than its predecessor. In fact, it got on par with the LS1 and beat it in some ways because it was better in receiving boost and nitrous. Then you go to the Coyote Mustang V8, which is just a game changer. It's our 2JZ of this era. And you also got the really good Toyota V6, which goes into the Camry and the Sienna, and also the Lotus. Like, you have some cars that just do really well in this era. And that all happened, I'll argue, in the mid to late 2000s.
Okay.
And I'll argue today we still have Coyotes and LTV8s that are based on that tech and really hasn't changed since then.
Okay.
So that's my argument of the best, what you quote Malaise era, because you said the 2000s in fairness. You said
I did.
2000 to 2010 is what you're referring to. So correct me on some of this.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on.
No, I'm with you, and I take your points. So here's the way I would split it up a little bit. I would split it up. I think the what we're calling the worst Malaise area, at least initially, is that 73-ish. To me, I would do 73 to about 83, 72 to 83, maybe 82. And then I would make the next era 83, 84 to 92, somewhere around there. And because here's why I think that's the next era. Because what happens is in the early 80s, you have the Japanese market come on the scene.
Okay.
And you have Germans doing some crazy cool things back then.
Which, unfortunately, we didn't get the good ones.
And we didn't get a lot of good ones. But you get a lot of cool things going on. You get turbos start showing up for the first time ever.
Okay, yeah. By the way, turbo in the 80s was just a word for the better thing.
Yeah.
Like, you had turbo shoes in the 80s, right? Like, it didn't mean anything mechanically, but it was just a word for...
But you had some crazy
good.
turbos, okay?
Sure.
You had a Porsche 959 in 86. I'm just going to throw that one out there.
Okay.
And then it stopped in 93, so that's when... I'm not saying that's when the Malaise that era stops, but I'm cutting the era off about around 92 because what happens is you got this transition of... You got several things going on. You got turbos showing up on the scene for the first time ever in cars.
Right.
You got imports showing up on the scene for the first time ever with fuel injection that freaking works.
Sure.
And you've got domestics trying to figure all that out. They're trying to figure out how to do fuel injection.
Yeah.
And they haven't done it yet. And you mentioned the multi-port that...
Right.
They
all had a way to get there. They all had their own journey.
Yeah. And I don't think that's the worst because I also think you still have clean, crisp body lines during this era.
Yeah.
Things aren't ballooned yet, okay? They're not... You're not drawing lines just to draw a line like in the New Edge on the Mustang. You're not drawing bubbles just to make a bubble like you are in the Taurus a little bit later in the next era.
Or any Prius with its
right
angry, appliance look going on.
So I think that's a fun, interesting era. Still a lot of unreliability, but you get like B pillars are still thin and A pillars are thin, and you can see out of the car, and things aren't overly done yet. So like the switches are still, they look normal. They're not overly done to make you feel manly. Like the trucks start happening in the 2000s.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then
the 04 to what, 08 Ford truck? It was like, what are you doing? It's like a Tonka truck in here. Yeah.
Okay, so then we go to, I would say the 92 to 94-ish to, maybe it's about 2004. Maybe it's around there. So maybe it's like 94 to 2004 is my next era. And that might be my next worst Malaise era. And here's why.
Did you not live through the previous area you just explained?
Yeah, I did. No, I did. I lived through this era.
The 959 is incredible. That's one car that like 10 people died.
I know. Okay, but listen. Look, you've got, and maybe I probably need to back that up. There's an era in between. Maybe it's 94 to like 98. You get some weird things happening, but then like 98 to like 2000, maybe it's like 2006. You start getting cooler things, like the lightning gets good, but then I don't know.
Oh, it does.
Here's my problem with the 2000s. Two things happen. Yes, the domestics figure out fuel injection finally, and performance gets better. 100%. Reliability also gets better.
Sure.
But you've also got some things. You got some mergers going on with Daimler Chrysler, which that was weird.
It was a weird era.
It was a weird era.
Yeah, mention the Chrysler of that era, because that was a time that we were following Chrysler pretty heavy.
You have the front wheel drive design, or the cab forward design going on, which was groundbreaking, but then made everything look like a bubble.
Well, that was just for the viewer or the listener viewers. Just for the viewers, that was Chrysler LHS,
New Yorker,
300M. Was it New Yorker in that time?
300M, Eagle.
Oh, you're talking early 90s. What era are you? I'm talking late 90s. I'm talking like the Dodge Intrepid.
Yeah.
The first CAD designed Intrepid, like the 98.
Yeah, that's the cab forward. That's all the cab forward design.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
So the Eagle wasn't in that term. That was before that.
No, Eagle was still in there.
Oh, was it that time?
Yeah. So the other thing you have happen is you have cars dying, like the Saturn dies in the early 2000s.
Your point?
It was a cool car coming when it first came out. They had something figured out, and then they ruined it.
It was General Motors Scion, and it was cool. I'm going to give it to you. In fact, a little trivia for you. I've owned a Saturn before.
Interesting.
And its clutch ate itself.
Okay.
But it was a fun car. It was cool.
My point is, you've got these mergers happening and these acquisitions happening and consolidation happening, and so some cars start dropping off the scene.
Sure.
And then you have Toyota owning everything. And by owning everything, I mean dominating everything.
You mean in terms of sales and quality?
Sales and quality. They were so good they could do whatever they want. They were so good they could make a Geo Prism and make it a Corolla with a 3-speed automatic and get away with it.
And sell all of them. Yeah.
And sell all of them. And it was bad to me, it was bad for the market. It made the market stale, boring, and weird. And you also get, everything gets ballooned and overstyled, and the belt line of all the cars goes up.
Well, I would argue that happens later on. That happens in like the mid-2000s. Or is that what you're trying to say? You're trying to say prior to that it was better, like the greenhouse?
No, the greenhouse starts coming up in that era.
I guess
and so, creeping. And then now I do think you start getting into 2008 and on, and in the teens especially, car manufacturers have, I think, really started figuring it out. They start doing the refreshes better. They tone the styling down a little bit. They mature. They evolve it instead of just reinventing the wheel to just be different because they don't know what to do.
Look, you're talking Toyota over here, and you're the more experienced Toyota owner in this room. Mm-hmm. I've had one. You've had like 14 or something, and so I would argue in that era that Toyota did not know what was going on. Not in that era, actually, the late like 08-ish to 2013. What was happening with the Camry?
Oh, I agree.
It looked
that's why the market got better. That's why it's not a Malaise era.
Okay, I got you.
Pre-2008 is a Malaise era. Like 98, 99, or maybe it's 2001 to 2008 is a Malaise era.
So we basically both agree that 05 to 15 is like the jam.
There's a lot of good stuff happening.
And can I tell you why I think it's so good? Because you've got a lot of things figured out. Reliability is basically solved, right?
Transmissions. So that's another thing. Electronic transmissions were also coming on the scene, and those were a problem. Yeah. Those get solved.
Yeah, okay, good point. So Mopar in the early 90s had a 4-speed automatic front-wheel drive transmission.
Everybody had a 4-speed automatic that was crap.
They were all bad. We went through several of them. The Ford AOD 4E or whatever, the AOD 4, the mechanical one lasted forever.
Yes.
And the electronic one didn't last forever.
Ugh, it's just awful.
It was awful. And that was for everyone. GM 700R4, I would argue, is a little bit better than those, but it still wasn't perfect.
But even the Ranger gets turned into a bubble in that era.
No, that's true. That's
It's
true. And
terrible.
that was just the look, right? That was just the style. Well, the style in general wasn't great in the 90s. Like, people look back at the 80s and go, oh, yeah, look at that style now, which I'm going to argue about that. It's not brilliant. But the 90s is probably worse, right? Like, it's at least not old enough to be cool.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now. And maybe our mind changes in 10 years.
Yeah.
But for right now, I'm going to argue the highlight for me on cars to drive. Let me be clear about that, to drive. Because you lack on technology because people seem to like that now. People want TVs in their cars. Remember on Pimp My Ride on MTV? They put a TV in the car.
Yeah.
Now you buy a Tesla or you buy a Corolla, they've got a TV in the dash. It's just how it is. Which is for better or worse, but I would argue that most of what happens on that screen does not make the car drive better.
No.
In the era of the 05 to 15, you had a lot of cars that did not have electronic power steering yet and also had fully defeatable traction and stability control options. Nowadays, you can't fully turn off stability control on just about anything.
Right.
You can get close, but if you really go to
That's
find
a
that
good point.
edge, that computer stops you before you find it,
That's a good point.
which is a double-edged sword. That makes the Hellcat possible to sell to the public,
Yep.
right? Keeps the lawyers at bay. But the flip side is your direct engagement has dwindled a little bit. And I would say in 05 to actually 09 to 2010, 2011, I would stop it there, is when that started to change.
That's a good point.
The Coyote Mustang came out in 2011, and also non-fully defeatable stability control, called Advanced Track, came out in 2011 as well.
Thank you, federal government.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but do you want to know the real answer to this question?
I just gave it to you.
No, the worst Malaise era.
Oh, yeah, sure. The secret one.
The secret, it's not the secret, it is the worst Malaise era. The early 20s. And here's why. So, the car...
20s as in 1920?
1920s. When does the car come on the scene?
Oh,
1910?
Hang on, stop.
19
Hang on, stop. Who cares?
No, listen.
Okay.
When the car first comes on the scene, that's pretty cool because there's a car, right? Like,
Right.
that's cool.
It's like horse or car.
But then they start developing it, and I don't really know what they're doing in the early 20s. You don't really have these big, cool, weird engines yet, and nothing's really fast, and the brakes, everything's still unreliable.
There's no flat 16 yet.
It's just not that cool yet. But then in the late 20s, it starts getting weird and cool with Duesenbergs and all kinds of stuff, and cool after that until the early 70s. Early 20s, terrible. No one wants a car in the early 20s. I'll just keep my horse.
That is the most irrelevant answer you've ever given.
So there's the best answer ever. With that, in the last section, we got to close this up. Fun with comments. We've had some good ones coming lately, Brian.
We've had a bunch of fun ones in the last week alone.
We've had a bunch of good ones. I know you've got a really good one. And before, as Brian's pulling it up, I'm just going to tell the viewers, please keep sending those in. They are so entertaining. They literally make our day, whether they're good, bad, mean, nice,
insightful,
they're just
nonsense, whatever they are.
It is so much fun. The engagement is fun. We love it.
And we both see all of them. We share them back and forth. Someone reads all of them. I can tell you right now.
We'll take a negative comment any day over a thumbs down.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And by the way, just so we're clear, if you don't like the car, don't thumbs down it.
Yeah.
If you don't like the video, go ahead and thumbs down it.
Yeah.
But rate the video, not the car, on the thumbing part.
That would be nice. Okay, so you've got a comment. Go ahead, lay it on us.
Okay, so I in a previous event at the State Auto Show at the Texas State Fair, we had the chance to get up close and personal with the all-new 2020 Subaru WRX.
You may have my comment.
Uh-oh. And the username, his handle, or her handle, is one more fish! Exclamation point. And here is verbatim.
Oh, you've got my comment.
Oh, such
We'll
for
do this
you.
one together.
Okay. I would like to personally thank Subaru for saving me a lot of money from buying another WRX or STI going forward.
So sad to see the rally car has been turned into a... Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for it.
Sally car! Oh my gosh.
This episode has been... And by the way, this is like a 5-minute walk around. We couldn't drive the car yet. It was in a show floor setting. But we were able to get early access to see the vehicles. Man, let me tell you, can we just tangent on this we got a minute on this.
Yeah.
Subaru teased this car for a while. And by the way, we're big fans of the WRX. We like it a lot. We both considered buying it a few times. And by the way, this is the first time we've had the same comment on the show.
Okay, so the viewers, we don't tell each other our comment.
No.
That we're going to pick. And
Yeah, so what's funny about this one is that I walked by and I said, look, I'm just gonna be candid. I'm disappointed in the way that it looks because the teaser shots they sent were like of just the taillight. It looked kind of BRZ like there's some influence there, which turns out is really a Civic looking more than anything else. But they never showed the full video. They showed like dust around the car in the desert doing cool drifty slidey things and like Recaro seats.
Why do car manufacturers like to show their cars with a bunch of dust around it?
Well, when you're doing a teaser, you don't want to show a little car. This one made sense for that. But they should have kept the dust on because they put Crosstrek fenders on a WRX, it looks like.
Ugh.
It looks terrible. And by the way, Craig, here's the good news. You can finally get Recaro seats in a WRX, non-STI. But you know what that comes with? Only a CVT transmission.
Ugh.
Which, if you're an enthusiast and you're into fun cars, the CVT is the antithesis of you being engaged with the car.
How did Recaro sign off on that?
I don't know.
Incredible. Anyways,
Yeah.
rally car to Sally car.
That's great.
Get gold, pure gold. That guy needs to be on our show.
For the record, you can get the manual still. Kudos to Subaru. Thank you for doing that, even though it looks
Sure.
like a Crosstrek. Yeah.
But we've also had some other comments on that car.
Okay.
One of them said, I don't have it here pulled up, but it basically said, thank you, Subaru. I'm going to save my money for the current gen.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we both talked about that. As soon as that car came out, the value of the current gen went through the roof
Absolutely.
in the enthusiast market.
Yeah. Okay, I do have one more, a bonus one, since we had the same one for us. 3 hours ago from one Donald Williams Jr.
I don't think I've read this.
You did. On the 2022 Chevy Silverado 02 Trail Boss, he's got a very insightful, deep comment, Brian.
This
Like,
one-
really
This
just...
one hits to the
You
core.
can tell he really thought this one through and really hammered his point home well. And that is, I'm going to read this verbatim. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I need one.
He is correct.
No, that's it. It just says,
Yeah.
I need one.
Yeah. We saw this at the auto show as well. Holy crap, it works in person so much better than online.
Anyways, refreshing comment.
Yeah.
Not a lot of opinion, just I need one. And you know what? He's not wrong. So he does need one. So I like that he put need and not want.
Correct. There's a difference.
Big difference. With that, Brian, we've got a show, and it's time to land a plane, and people are supposed to check us out on places like Tiki Taki and places like that. So
BrakeCheckShow.com for everything. Top right corner has a link to all of our outlets. And let us know if we are terrible or bearable. Thank you for watching this podcast. Have a good day.
so confusing.
It works.
All right, Sam.
Wrap it.
See you.